AIM on Air, the official podcast of the Association for Intelligent Information Management. Founded in 1944, AIM is dedicated to advancing the information management industry. We represent a vibrant global community of information leaders committed to driving exceptional business outcomes through information management fueled by technology like AI and automation. You can learn more at AIIM.org. I'm AIM President and CEO Tori Miller-Liu, and I am so pleased to welcome our guest today. He spent many years both covering and investing in the Canadian and U.S. technology sectors with Picton Mahoney Asset Management and RBC Capital Markets. He holds an HBA from the Ivy School of Business. He is an AIM International board member and an active member of both AIM's International's Leadership Council and the Microsoft Content AI Partner Program. In 2019, he acquired Colligo, where he is now CEO, and he is passionate about the company's mission to improve information governance for every organization around the world. Please welcome to AIM on Air, Tim Brady. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Tori. Good to be here. This is a podcast that's always on my list, and so eager to have the chance to chat with you here today.
Well, I'm excited to just jump right in with you. I've embarrassed you now with your bio and all your achievements and your experience. But one of the things that I was really interested in when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and stalking you online is you have so much experience with all these different technology sectors and industries. So why have you landed on information management industry? What got you interested in it and got you interested enough to actually acquire an IM company?
Yeah, and kind of teased it out a bit in the intro there, but the unique thread across all those different positions I was in and roles I had and prior jobs was really around the enterprise content management software space, right? And so even from day one at Royal Bank of Canada or RBC, I was covering the enterprise content management software space and got to know the players in the industry, whether it's OpenText or Microsoft or a bunch of the privates really well. And then when I went on to and be on the investor side of the table, it was the same thing, right? And that was always my sweet spot. Felt like I had a good knowledge of the space and could really understand what the companies were doing and why they were doing it, and just saw the tremendous opportunity taking place as organizations everywhere shifted these workloads to the cloud, right? And looked at cloud repositories and enterprise content management systems, and just saw a massive opportunity. The wave towards Microsoft 365 and the other cloud content management platforms was taking place, and I wanted to go capitalize on that and be a part of that, and put the operator hat on and really deliver value to clients in the space, right? So saw a huge gap and wanted to go make sure it was being served, and there was a valuable solution in the market for organizations and clients out there.
Do you feel like the gap still exists in the market, or do you think that I guess the market's reached a point of maturity where there are now known solutions to solve information management problems?
I think it's a bit of both. Like in my view, we're early days, right? So the numbers, whether you believe it's 40 or 50%, we're still in the early innings of cloud transitions more broadly, right? Like 40 to 50% of enterprises are on the cloud or wall to wall on the cloud, and still the other 50 or 60% left to go. And so it's still early days in terms of managing your content in the cloud. We're seeing every day, organizations come to us and say, we're on SharePoint 2016, for example, and we need to move, or one of the legacy enterprise content management systems from one of the other vendors, and we need to move to SharePoint Online or Microsoft 365, right? And so the fact that that just continues to take place, and it almost feels like it's accelerating, uh, just shows me that we're still early days. The other side of the coin is those that are early adopters of 365 and made the move a couple of years ago. We're certainly doing our best to serve all of them and provide a solution that helps them when they're in Microsoft 365 for managing their emails better and implementing better information governance. And so I do feel there's solutions out there, right? And especially with some of our good partner solutions around records management and some of the built-in capabilities of Microsoft, it's definitely evolving, and there's definitely good coverage out there. But as I said at the beginning, I mean, we're still early days here. I think there's a lot of room to run with companies shifting to the cloud.
You know, we it, I think digital transformation is not as much of a buzzword as it was probably 5 years ago, but when it was a buzzword and we were talking about it all the time, having cloud hosting or migrating to the cloud always seemed to be a characteristic of that. Do you think that's still true? And is that a characteristic, I guess, of a modern organization, in your opinion?
I do. I think cloud's a piece of that, right? It's shifting documents or content to cloud storage is a piece of that, right? But it's what else does that enable around it? And often it's
Mhm.
better collaboration, right? Better security, right? Better control around access and permissions and things like that. I think that's all part of the cohesive digitalization effort that needs to take place. But certainly it's it enables a lot of the other pieces by shifting workloads and information to the cloud.
So speaking of those modern enterprises and what they look like, one thing that really resonated with me in the bio on your website is that you want to see information management and information governance in every organization around the world, which is very aligned with AIM's mission, which is the same, to make sure information management is accessible to every organization. So I guess my question for you, since we've been talking about cloud solutions and we've been talking about M365 and other solutions, is information governance currently attainable for those smaller organizations?
I think it is, right? And so we look at it in terms of a spectrum, right? Where do you need to be? And it can even be a two by two, but where do you as an organization need to be on the compliance or governance vector, right? And then where do you need to be on the collaboration vector, right? And so, what you see with, say, like government organizations or highly regulated organizations is they want to be, at the far right end on the compliance and governance vector, right? And so that's super important for them. Usually they're big enterprises. And so they'll be more mature in the solutions and the procedures and the policies they have in place around information governance and compliance, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, even the small sized organizations or medium sized organizations, they still need this in place, right? I think there's still an opportunity, no matter what your size is, to put best practices in place, better manage your documents, reduce your risk. It becomes a risk conversation. What documents do you want exposed? Who has access to what? Where do things live? Right. I think that's important for even the smallest of SMB organizations out there that are shifting to Microsoft 365, and it's really for those organizations that don't have as stringent compliance requirements, they can leverage a lot more of what Microsoft has to offer, included in like an E5 license, for example, whether it's Purview or otherwise, right? And I think that that's something every organization needs to be thinking about. The climate and the environment that businesses are operating in today is very different than it was even 5 years ago, in terms of the threats out there and the risk of documents ending up in the wrong hands. And I think that every business should be thinking about this, whether you're at the kind of early maturity end of the maturity curve or the fully compliant right side of the compliance vector. So
You said two interesting things that I want to kind of dive into a little bit deeper. One is that people may already have some information governance tools in licenses they already have, like if you have the E5 license. So, do you find that that's kind of a universal truth where some enterprises just may be unaware that they actually already have tools in their stack that could help them with information management?
it could be, right. It could be. I mean, a big thing we lean on is leverage the software you already own. Microsoft 365, right? Highly capable foundational platform that we think every organization in the world should be using, right? And so, how do you make that do what your business requires, right? And in some cases, yes, it's included. Their clients we speak to aren't aware that they already have things built into their licensing, or maybe they can bolt on some Microsoft Purview add-ons, right, to get up that curve pretty quickly. But the more advanced and highly regulated organizations often have Microsoft and one of our partner solutions on top for records management, so they're a little more sophisticated there, or they're using Purview to the fullest extent. And so they generally have a better view of what's included in their licensing package.
That makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing I wanted to go back to is I loved your comment about the collaboration vector and the compliance vector. And in my head, I was actually picturing an impact risk
Mm,
matrix so I'm a small, I'm the executive of a small organization. And so I was almost thinking like, can I use that vector that you're talking about to sort of assess what's the appropriate level of investment for AIM? I mean, we're not in a
mm,
highly regulated industry, so my
mm,
level of investment might differ from an oil and gas industry or a utilities industry. But I, from what you're saying, there's still value in collaboration, and I still have some risk that I need to mitigate. So,
mm.
can can I, when you're talking about those vectors with your clients, can that actually be a determination about the level of investment that someone should make? What's appropriate for your enterprise?
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act, right? So you want to be as compliant and have as good information governance in place as you can, while not limiting or restricting the functions that people actually need to do their jobs, right? So not restricting collaboration so much that people can't do their jobs and it takes them double as long to do what they're trying to do, right? And so it's really that balancing act in our view. So and the investment often scales with that, right? So if you care, say we could just go to the extremes here, the 100% about compliance, and collaboration's not something we're as interested in because we are extremely highly regulated. Well, your investment on the compliance side and the tooling and the solutions and the software around doing that is going to be much greater, right? Whereas if you're, to the example, a smaller organization or a mid-sized enterprise, and you want basic information governance, you're protected and you check the box and you're secure and doing what you need to do. But collaboration's huge. It's a big part of your workflow and what you're doing every day, and you're sharing over teams and things like that. Then you're going to be balancing those two. And maybe what's in Microsoft 365, included in your license in there is enough for you, right? And so your investment might not be as great as if you're at either one of those extremes. Might be a framework for thinking about it.
Yeah, I love that framework. And it's the idea around compliance being a primary reason for investment is definitely echoed in our recent 2024 Industry Watch report, which you helped us draft that survey. And once again, compliance was the top reason for investing in IM. But you've talked about the value that information management and governance can add to collaboration. What other business outcomes are you seeing as reasons for potentially investing in information management right now?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest one we see every day is kind of what you're pointing to here. So compliance, right, is top of mind for many right now. I would say being more secure is very much up there with compliance, right? And maybe you have things like an email deletion policy in place, and you're just transferring your records over to SharePoint that you need to keep and want to keep, right? But so that security that obviously reduces your risk or becomes a risk conversation. I would say efficiency. It's like that same thing of how do we be as compliant as we can be, but still drive efficiencies in the organization, right? And so maybe we're leveraging as part of our information governance program metadata to set the context around documents and information, right? And so what can that metadata do for us? It can improve search and drive efficiency. So I'd kind of say like compliance is first and foremost, or better governance is first and foremost. But security is right up there, and the efficiencies are obviously the output that every organization wants to see. Your program's not going to last if it isn't easy for folks to follow and do, right? Uh, and so it has to check that box as well.
That's I like that idea of driving efficiency. And one way to drive efficiency is to go back to your earlier comment around leverage the technology that you already have. So let's talk about M365 for a moment. As an enterprise, I should be leveraging my M365 licenses, but there are times where M365 may hit a limit and you might need to extend the usefulness of M365. So Colligo provides these applications that helps organizations intelligently move, manage, and govern email in Microsoft 365. Where are the opportunities to extend the usefulness of M365, whether it's an email or otherwise?
Yeah, so obviously self-serving, but we believe email management is a crucial part that we can add value, right? I mean, 5 of 6 records entering the organization are said to come via email. So making sure you deem those emails as records or the attachment as records and putting them into that separate location, right? Obviously, in place records management in Outlook is something some organizations choose to do, but what we're seeing is most actually want that system of record to be SharePoint for keeping records, and being able to leverage the better management capabilities once they're moved over to SharePoint. And so email management is one where we certainly see an opportunity to add value to the great platform that Microsoft 365 has out of the box there. And it's not all emails that are records. As you're aware, it's really probably 10 or 5% of emails that come in that are actually records. But when it is a record, you need to be able to deem that a record, manage it, tag it, label it, stick it in the right place, and make sure it's secure, right? And so that's a key element of a proper email management program. But other areas I see, and it kind of ties into our prior conversation around our prior thread around the compliance and governance angle is, Microsoft has a great offering out of the box on the governance side for provisioning different Teams channels and SharePoint sites, but there's obviously you can do more, right? And so we have some good partners that build provisions as well, for site creation and Teams creation and managing users and things like that. That can be that's a high value add area on Microsoft platform as well. And then we also have great partners who build records management software that builds on top of SharePoint, and can be adjacent or an extension of Purview and some of the things you can do there as well. And so that's another area where I think there's a lot of value to be created out there working with other ISVs in the market. So those are some of the core we see. I mean, obviously our focus is on the email management side of the house, and being able to add value to organizations on that front. So,
And I think it's so important to note when you're doing a system selection, you actually want to look for a healthy ecosystem of partners like that. You don't want all of the solutions around an enterprise system to come just from the main source, the main provider, like Microsoft, right? So I think it's healthy that Microsoft has this partner ecosystem that has the add-ons and the extensions and the services that you can use to fully leverage the M365 environment, and also has a really vibrant user community, right?
absolutely. I mean, that's why Microsoft will and has won, in a lot of cases, and has the dominant market share in enterprise. I mean, the partner ecosystem is extremely strong. There's a metric out there that, for every dollar spent on a Microsoft 365 license, and I can't remember the exact number, but there's, it's a multiple of dollars that are created in the ecosystem because you have great, solution implementers and consultants, and then other ISVs, and a bunch of different solutions that come together to solve the problem the customer has, right? And at the end of the day, I mean, it's software is one piece of solving a problem for a customer, but often the problem is they don't care what tool necessarily they're using to solve it, but they just want to solve that problem they have or that challenge they have, right? And that might be help us with better information governance. Well, in that case, you're going to need Colligo, you're going to need a few other software vendors perhaps on top of Microsoft, and you're going to need a good implementer or consulting partner, right? And so it really brings the full picture together. And so those are some of the greatest success stories, when there's multiple parties at the table solving a challenging or complex problem for a customer.
I like that. Okay, so let's keep talking about how you might solve problems for customers. How do you see AI and machine learning potentially transforming the M365 ecosystem and solving new problems for customers?
Yeah, so it's huge, right? So obviously, when we talk about AI, we need to kind of set the boundaries on what we're talking about, because your Netflix recommendation engine has been AI for 10 years, right? Or your Tesla autopilot has been AI for 5 years, right? And so I think what we're probably kind of referring to, or what most enterprises are thinking about when they say AI, use that in kind of the common vernacular these days, is really how do we look at large language models, and how do we benefit from that and the outputs of that in the enterprise, right? And so I would say, from the Microsoft standpoint, they have the advantage, in my view, of being kind of the first mover and having the first mover advantage on Copilot, getting that into the hands of organizations, and early, quickly, right? It's widespread. I mean, people are calling it Copilot, even though there's other products out there, right? It's almost the Band-Aid effect on large language models right now, which is a fantastic position to be in. Great partnership, obviously, with OpenAI, but what they're doing is bringing the ability to search across all your enterprise information into like almost a local large language model and making that accessible at your fingertips. And so I think that's huge. It's going to change the way we work. I mean, many people are already using it, and the adoption is very strong in terms of using it in your daily workflows for really complex tasks, but also really simple tasks like drafting a job description, right? As an example, is one I commonly hear. And so I think it's adding quite a bit of efficiency. I'm hearing a lot about Copilot for developers as well, adding a lot of efficiency on the on that side of the house. But it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Like one view is that everybody's going to have an agent and be using a Copilot every day, but another view is really, well, AI and the large language models will just have to be embedded in every app you use, right? And so we're starting to see that with CRM systems, for example. They're all introducing their version of a large language model agent or something you can query or prompt to get a result that you might not have been able to do in traditional CRM search, right? And so that's the other view, is that it'll just be embedded everywhere. And you're seeing that Copilot has made it so it's extensible and open, so you can build apps around it as well, which is super interesting. And I think they're well positioned for both of those angles. Long way of saying, I just think it's huge, and we're obviously in the Gartner kind of hype cycle here. We're probably over the initial hype curve and in the trough of disillusionment right now, as people really search for use cases and line up budgets and everything like that before it kind of accelerates. And we find those killer use cases, but what we are kind of unanimously seeing is that people are learning about it, they're asking about it, and they're learning how to drive early efficiencies in their business, which are all great signs. And I think it'll just change the way we work more broadly.
Oh, that's fascinating. So how with the AI getting embedded in a lot of the tools that we use on a regular basis to manage information, how do you feel like this latest trend is going to impact information management practitioners in particular? What's the job of an information manager going to look like 2 years, 5 years from now?
And this is the key part, right? So right now we're in the race where everyone's ready for AI, right? We're not ready to go and deploy these co-pilots or other agents at scale yet, because everybody's data is a mess. It's not as organized as it should be. And so information governance professionals, their role is increasing in importance, right? And it's becoming a top agenda item to make sure our data estate is clean. We know what we have, where it lives, who has access to it, putting the permissions in place and the boundaries in place. And so I see that role as more important than ever. I mean, we're talking to large banks and financial institutions, existing clients of ours, and the information governance heads and leads are being promoted pretty quickly here, right, in terms of their clout within the organization. Direct lines to CIOs, and CIOs are getting involved in these conversations as well. So it's coming from the top. And I think it's just that it's, let's figure out what information we have, what's going to show up if we are to plug in one of these co-pilots in the future, or, outside of the test box, we already have it running. And what, tag our information, make sure it's structured, right, and ready to be used, and, actually effective when people do go to use it, right? And so I see that role just increasing in importance over the next few years.
And it sounds like from the way you're explaining it, do you also see it transitioning from almost a management role to more of a strategic role? Because you didn't once say they're going to be in charge of like entering the new metadata or something like that. You were talking a lot about almost a macro view of how are we using this unstructured data.
Yeah, and influencing policy, right? Like, maybe things now have to be tagged, whereas in the past it was nice if they were, or some departments did it. Maybe now every department needs to tag their emails as they file them, or use Microsoft syntax to tag our existing and content that's already in SharePoint for many years, right? And so I would say influencing policy, but yeah, I think we're seeing the elevation of importance there of the role, and maybe more strategic, having a seat at the table, working with the digital team and IT, bringing those roles together, but also, working with legal and compliance. And I think there's just, all those parts of the organization are coming together to figure out, a modern strategy, right? Whereas before it might have been a lot more siloed. is kind of a trend we're starting to see. So what's interesting to me, and I don't have a firm read on this yet, is information governance and data governance are seeming to be still a separate role, even though they're so intertwined, and information is data, right? And so still seeing a lot of organizations where those are two different individuals or two different roles. And so seeing how that's going to evolve, I would have thought they would have collapsed into one, and maybe at many organizations they have, but at quite a few spoken to, it's still a separate role, right? And so that's very interesting to see how that will play out and come together as well. So
Yeah, that is really interesting because you're right. It's the roles are evolving and it's gray areas between
mhm.
IT and IM, between data governance and IM. So it's really evolving and quite rapidly. So we've talked about the work of information management practitioners. I want to talk about your work for a moment. Often in these podcasts, I like to ask folks about something they worked on recently that got really excited about and was a huge win for them. So what's a big win that's happened recently that you're really excited about?
Yeah, so we were working with an organization that generally is an industry that's slower to move to the cloud and adopt a full digitalization process, and being able to go in there and transform this business. And so an example would be before we came in and were able to influence what they were doing with emails and a modern email management program, they were actually printing off emails, tagging them, putting them in the filing cabinet, or uploading them and scanning them back into Microsoft and then storing them somewhere, right? And so their quote, their time that they saved per email was 12 minutes in doing it the historical way versus what we do at Colligo. Now, we often like to say we save people a minute or 2 minutes on every email filed versus a more manual way of downloading a file, uploading it to SharePoint, and tagging it with all the proper metadata and applying a retention label. So we generally can cut your time down from 3 or 2 minutes to one or less, or even zero if you're using our auto file, bulk file capability. But with this organization, the way they were doing it, and they're not alone, I've spoken to other organizations doing it this way, is 12 minutes in time savings per email, right? And so the admin time we were able to unlock for that team, it's just been massive. They're very excited about it. Obviously, a government related or government sponsored entity, and so they do have the requirement to file a ton of emails and records. They can't miss any. So this was just and these people, they're just repurposing their time, right? They're not going away. They're just repurposing their time to other jobs and other things they can be doing to add value to the organization. So that was huge. It's still a journey. They moved from a legacy enterprise content management system to SharePoint Online, so are newer to the M365 stack. So still growing on the maturity curve. They're layering in things like Microsoft Purview and their early days on that front. So it's going to be a full end-to-end transformation here, but even the early transformation we've seen and the results have been amazing, and it just gives me inspiration to go and do that for many, many, many other organizations as well, and gets me excited. So
That's amazing. Because if you're talking 12 minutes per email, that could potentially be like hours per day, right? Depending on how many emails you get. That's great.
it's wild, and again, that's the outlier, right? There's a few of these that are doing it
Yeah.
that way, the paper-based scan back, and not every organization's that drastic of a saving. We need to get them into a case study, right?
Yeah.
But certainly it was just like incredible. I almost fell off my chair the first time I heard how much time they told us we were saving them. So yeah.
Okay, but I am curious from a technical standpoint, how do you figure out the time savings? Are you using like Microsoft Viva or something? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, no, in a lot of our customer cases, they just time it. It's as simple as show me what you are doing today, and then show us the
Oh,
new way, and
cool.
we'll show you what it can look like, right? And then they go test it and validate it. And it's as simple as start the timer and turn the timer off. So
That's great. Just some like standard user research. Like
yeah,
just watch it.
exactly. Yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah.
All right, so let's end with this last question, Tim. What do you think information leaders should be thinking about right now to prepare for the future?
Yeah, so crucible moment, right? A lot going on. Obviously, every information leader has to be aware evolving and what's available to them through AI, right? They don't necessarily need to have all the answers, in my view, because it's a moving target at this point and it's still evolving. We're early days, but definitely have a good pulse on how that is evolving, what's changing, what's out there and available to you. and understanding what impacts it could have on your business, right? And start developing the thesis there around that. I would say, as I said earlier, the readying for AI, right? You may or may not use one of these solutions in the future, probably will, or maybe it'll be embedded in some other application. But there's no downside, and you're not going to hurt your organization by implementing better information governance now, ratcheting up your compliance, just making sure data is actually tagged, structured. You're getting rid of the redundant and obsolete trivial information, the rot, right? Clean that out. It's a great opportunity. There's probably budget available to you if you position it this way to go and to take on those projects, right? Tag our data, structure it, clean it up to protect ourselves for the future, know what we have, get rid of silos, information silos that are often departments, and consolidate to maybe less systems of record or centralized repositories. So those are all the things I'm having the conversations with CIOs that they're talking about that need to be on their agenda. My view on what they should be thinking about every day.
All right. What a great way to end. Thank you, Tim, for sharing all of your insights on AIM on Air. If listeners are interested in learning more about AIM and the resources we offer to help you advance your information management programs, we encourage you to go visit AIIM.org. Thanks so much, Tim, for being on AIM on Air.